Welcome back. The next topic is object-oriented analysis and design, or what is abbreviated OOAD. And this topic chapter is kind of unique in our offering as a BA course. A lot of BA course descriptions will not have this topic because it's considered more of a technical thing that BAs don't need to know about. But I included this topic specifically because it's important in two angles. One, there's a lot of learning from here where you can even adopt it in your own way of doing things. Like for example, they talk about repeatable process. So you could create repeatable process, repeatable requirement, so that you put together a requirement that you're referencing it. So that way, if something changes, it's centralized. You're not changing 4 documents where it's being used. If you copy paste it in four places, instead, if you keep it in a 5th document and say, as per rule number 1 there, right? Then you're at least centralizing it and you only have to change that document number 5, rule number 1, instead of these 4 other documents. So it derives some good practices to keep up within our job as well. So that is one reason. The other reason is when we get into more technical aspects like object, like ERD, or SQL. I think having this background is certainly helpful to any business analyst. So we'll be touching upon these, but more at the conceptual level, not at the coding level. Okay. So programmers use this a lot, and this is kind of ingrained in their DNA of how they do things. It's like a second nature to them. But if we take a moment and review this, I think it's really good information, and even to have discussions with them or understand why they're doing certain things certain way. I think it's helpful context. So we'll start with the basics and then how we can have that object-oriented mindset. First thing, what are the benefits of object orientation? One thing is you can understand what is important, what is critical in all the information that is thrown at you. Think about keywords. So in a project, let's say you're working on an insurance project. There are certain keywords that they will be using left and right. It might sound like a normal English word, but that connotation has a very specific and distinctive reference within their organization, right? We might all know what a policy is at a basic level, but they might have other information about that insurance space that we don't use on a regular basis. So it allows you to construct a good set of glossary of what terms are used in that industry. And then as information is thrown at you, it helps you catalog and organize them much better so that you can adapt to any changes that are needed in the software or whatnot, because it puts you in a good, gives you a good frame of reference. Okay. And then of course, collaborating with the programmers is an added benefit as well. All right, now let's talk about what are objects and why do we say objects are the basis of analysis? Now, let's say you're learning a new language, right? One of your key contributions is the vocabulary. The number of words you know within that language helps you understand better, helps you speak better. Similarly, learning a new system, objects are going to be everywhere, right? For example, in a system that I used, there is a term called notification. Okay, what is a notification to a general consumer? Like, your layman description to a notification. It's either a text message or it's an email or whatnot, right? Like you can be notified anyway, even postal mail for that matter, right? Notification is a mechanism for someone to be notified. But in a project that I was working at, notification specifically meant emails that you can subscribe to as an opt-in or opt-out. That is what they called notifications. It wasn't system emails that were randomly generated. Let's say when something that you submitted processed, we send out an email. That is not a notification, that is an email, because you can't subscribe to it, you can't unsubscribe to it. It's always sent to you. that they call system email. Very different from notifications, right? So for me as an analyst on that project, I'll need to know, okay, when they say notification, they mean a subscribable notification where you can go into the screen and then check the checkbox to get the notification, uncheck the checkbox to stop getting that notification. And if you're, and based on what roles you have for that system, you only have a subset of notifications available to you, right? This is fundamental for me to follow the conversation even, correct? But if I did not, I would be completely misled and making my own assumptions, which is not good, right? That's why identifying these key things, objects are nothing but things, is so critical when they talk about in the project, snatching and getting the things noted. So identifying the key objects, and objects have something intrinsic built within them. Every object has these two things, data and function. Data as in, I have a health insurance example right there, right? So health insurance, if you take that as a policy, what is the premium amount? What is the expiration date, right? The name value pair, as they would call it. When you say name value pair, it's nothing complex. Premium amount equal to $2,000. Expiration date equal to end of this year, right? The last day of this year, 12/31, whatever, right? So that is the data. And then you also have functions. Functions is, okay, what can you do with this policy? You can pay for medical visits, pay for emergency room visits, pay for prescriptions, right? So the reason you have a policy is because it offers these benefits 1, 2, and 3. These are its functions. So in the notification example I spoke about, notification data would be, what is the subject line? What is the body of the email? Who is it being sent to? Which email ID is it sent from? Right? All this is data about that notification. Are you subscribed or not? Right? Which roles have access to that notification available to them? All this is data about the notification. And what is the function of notification? It enables your customers to be aware of certain things that happen in your system, right? So objects are pretty much everywhere, like, just like regular objects around us. When you look at it systemically, objects are everywhere. And then once you identify, okay, these objects relate with each other, then the problem statement becomes more uncovered easily. You can relate to the relationship between them. For example, let's say you have an insurance policy and you have a customer. These are two objects. A customer can have multiple insurance policies, right? A policy can be supporting multiple customers as well. Maybe it's like a joint policy. It's a mortgage, it's a loan related policy where two members have taken the loan, a borrower and a co-borrower. So policy may be attached to two customers. So it helps you appreciate how these different objects play together and how things flow together in the grand scheme of things, right?
Yes.
Now we discussed about the object having data and functions, okay? And now one more key distinction here. Some objects are tangible, like cookie, laptop, chair, things around you, right? Some objects, even that we speak on a regular English basis, they're not tangible. They are like concepts. They are made up to be referenced as an object. For example, loan, bank account, donation, right? Do you ever see them? It's just the name of a specific transaction. It's just a name of a specific relationship, right? Employment. Where is my employment? You can't point to it, right? It's not like a tangible thing, but employment itself has certain characteristics that you would call it an object because it has data, it has functions. Employment would be employment start date, employment type, are you a W-2 or a contractor? There you go, you have data. What is the function? The function is get you paid. Make sense? Any questions so far?
No, not for me.
All right. I'm going to have you just glance through some of these examples. just to get a little bit more context of the data and the functions part. Gives you an idea, right? So essentially anything that you can attribute data to as well as function to is an object. Now, I'm going to give you all 10 minutes and I want you to read this, okay? Read this exercise. And you're going to identify which one of these is an object, okay? So the simpler way to do it is figure out, okay, can you associate it to data and a function? If yes, it is. If not, it isn't, right? And we'll come back and review the answers. Sounds good?
Yes.
You can do it as a group. Discuss, run each of these through a test. Does it have a data? Does it have a function? And then give me the responses. And you have 10 minutes, might seem like a lot, but not. So just keep moving from one to the next one quickly. Okay.
Okay.
I'll let you guys discuss. I'll hop off and then I'll come back in 10 minutes.
Okay.
All right.
Any questions before I leave?
No.
No.
Okay. All right. Carry on, please. All right. Welcome back. So why don't you guys give me your findings? So let's first start with what are the objects? Let's go with what are the objects as we go through the list. So you guys, one of you can just read on what do you think are definitely the objects. And I heard you were questioning a couple of things as I walked in. So as you go through the list, you can tell me which ones are questionable as well. Yes, go ahead. One of you can.
So we said loan is an object.
Okay, perfect.
We agreed on that. And borrow account also is an object.
Okay.
We were not sure about principal and interest rate. We had question marks on those.
So we had, no. Let's go through the list in the order. So loan, yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
What about borrower?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Co-borrower? Of course, yes, right?
No, co-borrower.
Borrower and co-borrower kind of, they fall in the same boat.
They have to, yeah.
So if borrower is, we were not sure about borrower actually.
Okay, so borrower, you don't know if it's you're not sure. Okay. So can you come up with data?
Yes.
Okay, what is some of the data?
I think we agreed, Tajal, on borrower that
We did. Maybe I forgot to put it on my list then.
Yeah, we agreed because borrower, you look at how much you make.
Oh, yeah,
Good.
yeah. We discussed it. Yeah,
Good.
correct.
Then borrower, co-borrower, they must be both objects. Okay, next one. Document custodian.
No.
No.
It's not an object?
No.
Why not?
Document.
What are they keeping? It's where's the data for document custodian? I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
Document custodian is whoever holds the document, right? Like an escrow.
Yeah.
Whoever is responsible to hold the document, right? So document custodian has the company name, company address, what kind of documents they are licensed to hold, what is their disaster prevention policy. Like there's tons of data around them. And then their function is obvious, right? They act as a custodian to the documents.
Take care of the documents. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So that is an object as well. Borrower account, you guys said yes. What about customer service agent?
I would say yes now based on what you said about document custodian.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now principal.
We said
We're questioning.
When
We're
you're
not
questioning,
sure.
which way are you questioning? Are you saying it's probably a object, probably not an object?
It has data, definitely. Principal has data.
You didn't answer my question. Do you think it's an object or not an object?
You're not sure.
We're not sure. We'd put a question mark on that.
But then you have to be leaning one way or the other. If time is running out, you have to either answer this way or that way. Otherwise, you lose the point anyway.
I would say
which
that.
way
I would
would you
say it's
answer?
an object. I would say it's an object.
What about others?
Interest rate, yes.
No, principle.
Oh.
Yeah, it's an object. It's an object.
Okay. One more vote on principle.
It is, I mean, it definitely has data. It serves a purpose because, principal is part of your loan.
You're very good at answering the question without answering the question.
Yeah.
You will do well at the interviews for sure.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
what she says is accurate. You can't question her on that. It's not the answer, but what she's saying is not wrong.
Mm.
You will do very good at interviews.
Okay, I will go with the majority and I'll say it's an object.
Uh-oh. You almost had it right there. It's not an object.
Oh.
Ah.
It is data by itself, right? Principal is data. What is the principal amount? X dollars.
Okay.
It's data by itself. So it cannot be an object because object has data and functions, right? Something as a data cannot be another object, correct?
Right.
Okay, interest rate.
Interest rate and principal is the same. So
Exactly, sure. Yep,
data on its own.
Data, yeah.
correct. Interest calculation logic.
I would say it's an
not an object.
It's not because it's a function by itself,
oh.
Right.
right? The logic is a function. It's a method on how you do it. So it's a function by itself and hence not an object. You might think, oh, you do have interest rate and all that associated to it, but it's associated, but not. It's only referenced, right? Interest doesn't belong to interest calculation logic. It belongs to the loan. Makes
Okay.
sense. All right, different types of loans.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm,
Oh my God.
Don't confuse.
I can see why you can be confused there based on how it's termed. Different types of loans. Loan is an object, different types of loan is an object, but it's not saying like car loan or how home loan and whatnot. That's not the intention of the question. I don't know if it's unclear.
Oh,
that
it's
causes
just like
confusion.
options that you have. and
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Within a home loan, are you having a fixed rate or an adjustable rate or whatnot? Right? Maybe the wording is throwing you off a little bit, but the intention was different types of a certain loan. So that would be data, right?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Equifax, the company used for credit check.
Yes.
It's an object.
Good. Yes. Loan terms.
Loan terms is an object.
It's an object.
No, they are data, right? The terms of the loan are all data.
Yeah, loan terms. Yeah.
You can't come up with an object directly for the loan terms itself. Whatever you come up with, it's probably a function of the loan, not a function of the loan or the borrower, not directly on the loan terms. Because loan terms means, okay, how long do you have to pay? How much do you have to pay monthly basis? What is the penalty if you don't pay, right? It's all about information. Nothing functional about it.
Okay.
Okay. Payment.
Payment?
No.
Yeah.
No. It's a function.
Yes, it is. It is an object, I
It is
think.
an object. I think it's an object.
Yep, it is an object. Loan note.
Oh.
Loan note, depending on what we have discussed so far, is not an object.
That's correct because it's
It's
just
a document.
it's another word for loan terms, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, right. Borrower account. Oh, it's listed twice. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Customer service agent.
Yes. Again, twice.
Oh, yes. Okay. Late payment fees.
No, it's
No.
not an object.
Why?
No, it is an object because if payment is an object, late payment fees is also an
Oh,
object.
yeah. We listed it under object. Yes. It's an
Yeah.
object.
All I have to ask is why to throw you guys off. You are on the right track.
Yeah.
It is not an object. As soon as I question, you plant a question in your mind. It is just data, right? Okay, what is the fees? Correct?
Okay, okay.
I
But
think
if
this
it's a
exercise,
late payment fees paid,
what payment fees paid?
late payment fees paid, if the term was late payment fees paid, then would it be an object?
No, that still belongs to the loan, the late payment of the loan, right?
Then how come payment is an object? Because payment is also isn't, I'm
Very
assuming,
good point. Very
yeah.
good point. Very good point. Okay. So late payment fees is a data only because it can either be a data of the payment object and or the loan object.
Okay.
Correct? Now this is not payment alone. This is about how much fees. Correct? It's a name value pair. It's what is the fees. Correct?
Right.
Whether the payment is paid or not is still within your payment object or loan object. Correct? It's really the payment object. Whether this was paid or not resides there. So this is just providing information. It's not having a function.
Okay.
Okay. So I think this exercise is useful because it gives you context of knowing, singling out the objects that are of interest. And I think more so when I point you where you're wrong, I think it gives you enough ammunition to do this even more accurately. Right?
Right, right.
All right. Great. That's why this test really works well. Your test is really, can I come up with an object? Can I come up with the data? Then yes. And sometimes you might make mistakes there, but that's a good place to start because for late payment fees, the objects that the functions that you come up with don't directly belong to them. It belongs to another object, right? That's another catch that you have to watch out for. Okay. All right. Now let's get a little bit more closer to what this object business is. So an object, now technically speaking, right now we've been like generic layman speak. Now getting into technical language, it's defined as a single uniquely identifiable thing, right? A car object. You can call it, okay, what is the make, what is the model? So whatever you see with the equal sign is data, correct? And whatever you see in blue is the value. So you have name value pair. That's what I mean by name value pair. Name is make, value is Toyota. Model is Camry, year is 2007, so on, right? Now objects can access each other's functions by sending or receiving messages. Now we get a little bit more interesting. Okay, so we said each of these objects has a function, correct? Now you need to start remembering that these objects interact with each other all the time. And how they interact is by sending and receiving messages. Okay? Sending and receiving messages. So now here you have an example. iPod object dot play, meaning you're exercising the play function of the iPod. Okay? And you're choosing the 7th song on the playlist. That's data. So I, as a person, a user, right, owner of the iPod, I'm saying, hey, I want you to play the 7th song in the playlist. And the way I do it is I choose the play function and I specify which song to play. So I'm exercising a function and data. I'll repeat that. I, as a person or a user, I'm invoking is a technical term because I'm utilizing, right? Invoking the iPad object and asking it to play the 7th song on the playlist. And when I'm asking it to do so, I'm exercising the play function. And I'm also providing additional information that I want the 7th song on the playlist. Of course, you can get into details about which playlist and all that, right? So this could really be 7th song, playlist number 2, correct? If you really want to get to that level. But again, you get the idea. So to get utility from each other, the objects have to ask each other. And in asking, the data and functions get called out in the messages. So what we reviewed is one sample message. And the technical world, we call it, okay, messages are passed. So I'm passing 7-song on playlist message to the iPod, and I invoke the play function. Make sense? Similarly, you can look at the couple of other examples as well. I'll just give it a minute. And also read the last example of an object. That pretty much summarizes all that we've learned so far. The last object definition. All right. Now let's get to a class. A classification of similar objects that share the same attributes, operations, and relationships is called a class. What does that mean? I can come up with an automobile class, which means anything that is a vehicle, anything that moves, right? A car class, SUV class, Toyota Camry car class. So now in the previous example, we spoke about a specific Toyota Camry because note that there's a VIN number, right? There's a VIN number. So you're talking about a specific Toyota Camry. Now let's generalize it more. Let's remove the VIN number, right? Then your description, Toyota Camry 2007 black manual front wheel drive 4-door. It's probably not one car, right? You're probably describing several thousand cars even, possibly, right?
Right.
And then remove one more characteristic from there. Remove transmission type manual, right? Could be any transmission type. Now from several thousands, you're going to probably tens of thousands, right? That are all black, right? So as you remove these attributes, the larger your population becomes. Isn't that interesting, right? So when you say object, an object always has an ID. So if I talk about object, my Samsung phone object, there's only one of its kind because it has a serial number. That's the specific object I'm talking about. But then if I'm talking about my Samsung Note 10 phone, then I'm including every Note 10 that was manufactured. Now I'm talking about a class. So the key ID between an object and class, how you identify an object in a class, is an object has ID. Again, I'll repeat that. The key ID, how you would identify a class from an object, is an object has an ID. It represents a single thing. A class talks about conceptually several different things. So to kind of revisit and even contradict what we said so far. We said loan is an object. Again, we oversimplified it, right? A loan is an object, but in technicality, loan is a class. Loan number 1, 2, 3 is an object. Make sense? If anyone is unclear about that distinction, now would be a good time to resolve that and put that to rest, because the next concepts are kind of fundamental based on this understanding. Any questions on the distinction of class and object? Okay, now is it going really well or really bad?
It's going well, trying to suck it in.
Oh, I was
Okay.
asking you something and I was on mute. So
Okay. Okay.
so what my understanding is that an object has gone through all the possible classifications. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. By the time you narrow down an object, you've gone through multiple levels of classifications, multiple levels of classes.
Okay.
Correct. That's a very good way to put it. Because as you go into it, let's start with Toyota, right? You start with Toyota, it's very broad. I mean, first of all, let's talk about car, even before Toyota, right? Let's talk about car and automobile and whatnot. So you talk about an automobile generally, right? Then you talk about four-wheeled automobiles. Then you talk about cars. Then you talk about Toyotas. Then you talk about Camrys. Then you talk about all the 2007s, right? So classes are at different levels, correct? So you can, because it's a concept, you're thinking about something. For example, let's take a Word file that is saved on your computer, right? Give it a unique file name, give it a unique location, it is an object. Let's say I send you a template to fill in. Okay, to join this course, you need to fill in this Word file and then send it back to me by tomorrow. I'm sending you that template, that Word file for you to fill in. That template is a class because it doesn't contain either of any of your registration information. It's just a blank template, correct? But it's still a form. It's like a registration form, class. Registration form, class. The moment you fill that information and save it on your computer with your specific information, right? As soon as you fill it in with your specific information and save it on your object, on your computer, an object is born. Okay, and it stays an object. You email it to me, it stays an object. Make sense?
Yeah.
So your class is a template, object is the actual thing. So for the car, for example, let's just take out the VIN number, right? You have a template for the car. The manufacturer, Toyota, knows exactly how to build this type of car in this color with the manual transmission, right? They have a blueprint, they have a template, they have a recipe to build that specific object, which is the class. Make sense?
Yes.
Once they churn out a Toyota Camry matching these specifications out of the factory, then an object is born. So when we say object is born, the technical term to use there is an object is instantiated. An object is instantiated. You create an instance of an object from the class template. You create an instance of the class, you create an instance of the object from the class template. I give you something to photocopy. Every copy that you make is an object. The primary photocopy, that is the main concept, that is your class. Make sense? Now, remember these C words. So if it's a class, it has to be a cluster or a collection or a classification of objects, right? Collection of things. Okay.
Okay, what I don't understand is like what you just mentioned, that if you have given one copy, one document to make copies of, then all the individual copies are objects.
Very good point. You're questioning that, right?
Right.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So unless something distinctly defines that particular one, it is not an object. I kind of oversimplified it, but let's take it up again. So I gave you a hard copy of my something, right? Like I give you a hard copy of my license, correct?
Right.
If that is what you're copying, then that itself is an object, correct?
I kind of get it, but then like I'm questioning that, wouldn't that be a scenario of Toyota without a VIN number kind of thing? Because now you have so many, they are just like copies of each other.
Still, each one has its own characteristic, right? So if you get down to the detail of it, each sheet of paper is a different thing, right? It's a different thing churned out. I have a master, right? I only have one master. Let's say it's laminated and everything. I have my license. Only one thing exists in that world. It's pretty specific at that point. Now, when I
Okay.
make copies, you're using that recipe to churn out multiple copies,
Okay.
right? But still, you might argue that what I have myself, if it's a driver license ID, then that itself is an object, correct?
Right.
That itself is unique anyway. I think that's why you're questioning, correct?
Yeah, that's a very specific document. So it is an object.
Perfect. Yes. So far we are good. So that is a specific document, belongs to one person, can be uniquely identified. So it is an object by itself. Now, when you start making copies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you're instantiating copy number 1 of license, copy number 2 of license, copy number 3 of license. Correct?
Right.
Let's say my license ID is 5,000, right? No matter how many copies you make, it's all going to say 5,000, which means this is copy 1 of 5,000, which is very unique from copy 2 of 5,000. Correct? They are two different things, right? They are on two different pieces of paper.
Okay.
Correct? So I see why the confusion is, and I could have probably avoided it, but my statement still holds good. Meaning the license copy is not being, you're not creating multiple licenses from the single license. You're only creating multiple copies.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So the copy object is born every time you make a copy. The license object is not born.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very interesting observation. Yeah. I think the example that is easier to perceive is the previous one that I gave you. I give you a blank template, you fill it in, and then you may make more copies of the same thing, right? That's more straightforward than this one, because yeah, I can see why this can cause confusion. But excellent point, excellent discussion. I learn a lot while I teach, and that's one reason I enjoy it a lot. Too bad I'm not able to so much anymore, but that's a very good observation. All right. So now that we know objects and classes inside out amazingly well, let's delve into these concepts of classes and objects and how they relate to us as business analysts. So the first concept I want to talk about is encapsulation or data hiding. Okay. Encapsulation sounds complex. Just remember data hiding for now. Okay. So learning to drive is easy enough, right? Because there's very little that you need to know about how the car drives, the mechanics of how a car drives. Thank God you don't have to, wake up early in the morning, set up the, engine and tell it what ratio to pump the air and fuel in, and you don't deal with the internal workings of the engine. You just start the motor and it knows what to do, correct? If we had to give specific instructions for the inner workings of the engine, then we would have very few drivers and Uber would probably never exist today, right? So there's a reason it's kept simple. You only can deal with very limited. If you consider your car, you're probably interacting with less than 1% of what your car is all about, right? Because the car inner workings are extremely complex. You only have very little to do with what your commands are to the car. So going back to the messages, how we talk to the car, all you're doing is start engine or turn wiper on at this speed. Slow down. You're giving it very simple functions. Your simple function of slow down. Okay. All you do is put the legs on the brake. That very simple function translates to several very complex functions behind the scenes, and eventually the brake is applied. Make sense? So you as a user have very little to do with internal workings. You only have limited interfaces available to you. So Your wiper button is an interface. Your start button is an interface. You have very limited interfaces available to you, right? And hence you can simply drive from one car to another car. You're not learning to drive an entire different car all over again, right? It's very easy enough to drive from one car to another. So encapsulation or data hiding is a concept that is also used in IT to make sure that objects only have the limited interaction they need. Objects or classes only have the limited interaction they need, and they don't need too much of it. Okay. So let's take an example here. Now, Bank of America, initially, all of us had your ATM and whatnot, right? So initially, you used to deposit, maybe this example is dated this time and age, but initially you used to deposit by putting the check on an envelope and then pushing it into the ATM, and then they will open it up later and then process it and credit your account. And then all of a sudden, they change the ATM such that you can just insert the check into the ATM, right? And you as a customer, you didn't go and fumble. You saw very simple text. Okay, you don't need to insert the envelope. You can just put in the check directly and put it in this direction. You got to seamlessly use that new ATM interface without much trouble to you. You didn't have to worry about how that check got scanned, because you can see the image right away, right? They put a scanner within there. They asked you to look at the check. They attempted to read the amount on the check. They put it for you to edit. Make sense? With all that additional stuff that was going on behind the scenes, all you had to do is skip the envelope, put the check in the right direction. Very minimal changes to you. So essentially, what is exposed to the user or any other object internally, of all the objects internally, what is exposed to the user is minimalistic and as simple as possible. And you don't want them to be exposed with that internal logic as much as you can until it's useful for them or more information is helpful for them. Otherwise, just keep it very, very simple for the user. So you don't have to uh, have too much of exposure of your internal workings to the user. Otherwise, it becomes difficult to learn, difficult to operate. Okay. So encapsulation or data hiding means objects only provide limited interfaces to the users of those objects. This actually protects an object's internal working so that it's not mistreated, I want to say almost, so that that object can be, the integrity of that object can be maintained. It is hard to screw something up. For example, every time I turn on my cell phone, if I have to tell a whole lot of things, it asks me, okay, what is the maximum temperature you want the cell phone to operate on? That'll be ridiculous, right? You don't need all that. They're supposed to have figured it out. If it's too hot for the cell phone to handle, put a notification up. I don't know if you've seen that. If you're in the beach or whatever for a while, it tells you, the temperature is too hot for the phone. Do you want to turn it off? Or sometimes it might even auto shut off.
Yeah, it automatically turns off. Yeah.
Yeah. So all those things you don't have to be answering, right? If it happens, then the system figures it out. And the more and more systems become very simpler, the more better it is to maintain. But it's very, very hard to create those systems because we overcomplicate things unnecessarily. So to build that simplistic approach, this concept is really important. Okay, do I really need the user to choose this? For example, I have a couple of bank accounts. One bank account, by the time I get to a statement, it is unbelievable. I have to choose an account from the drop down. I might have only one account with that bank. I only have one account with bank, by the way. I still have to pick that single account from the drop down. Okay. I have to put the form date and the to date. And then I have to generate the statement. Now, when I put the from date and to date, it allows me to put any date. However, it only allows me to download 3 months at a time. Couldn't they have restricted it to 3 months when I'm choosing the date? Or even better, take me to that one account that I have, ask me if I want the last 1 month statement or 2 month statement or 3 month statement. One question, 3 radio buttons, and then have a fourth option, right? Or could they have started with, okay, here are your last month statements. Do you need to download more? Just click on view more. And I have another bank account which precisely does that. As soon as I go into the statements page or the transactions page, it shows me the last 30 days. And to reveal the next 30 days, all I have to do is view more, view more. So you're unnecessarily wasting the time of the user every single time, especially I just can't get beyond the point of they make me select the one account that I have from the drop down, right? Simply means they didn't think through it, right? So essentially you want to expose very minimal information to the end user, keep it very simple for them, and that would be encapsulation. And in an IT speak, let's say we have a loan object and the payment object. They are very close to each other, but they don't have to be too intimate about what information each of them knows. For example, every time a payment comes through for a certain loan, it has to be credited on the loan object, right? So the payment object tells the loan object, hey, loan number 1250, payment received is $2,000 on this date. That's it. Now the loan object can take that information and process it. Okay, so now that the payment was made on this date, is there any late fees? Have they included the late fees? All that calculation happens within the loan object. Maybe it consults with like a late payment object and figures out everything within itself, and then it calculates a new balance, next month's payment owed, whether the loan is current or if the status needs to be updated. All that happens within itself. So if the payment object had to mess with all that and it has to mention the new payment terms and next month payment terms and whatnot, it becomes overly complicated. So when the developers develop it, all they will look for is what is the minimum information the loan object needs from the payment object. Okay. What does the loan object need for its running, for it to calculate the new balance, the next month payment, and the loan status and all that? So that is the developer way of thinking. For us, the takeaway is, okay, I have these multiple objects exchanging information with each other, but I'm most concerned with how the end user is operating the system, how they are using the system. That is my most concern. So how can I get the least information from the user and give them the most information from the system? The transaction example is, the statement example is one thing I told you about, right? So similarly, how can you make the user interface very, very simple? Try to understand what the user will want and then keep it a minimalistic experience, not ask them 10 questions to do a simple thing. For example, when you log in, sometimes you might see, okay, which page do you want to go into? I thought that was like very, very well thought of, whoever did it first, right? So as you log in, you can choose, okay, am I going to pay my loan, or I'm going to transfer money to someone, or am I just going to view my account? So right then and there, you're logging in, you select one more option, you're right onto that page. It might seem like a very little thing, right? But that's like a time saving feature, because I'm logging in, I'm going to that same old standard page that I go into every single time, because you're making an assumption. Instead, let's get this additional information. So in this case, it's more information that you're passing, but it's useful for the customer. So anytime you're asking for something more, make sure it contributes and provides them with better customer experience. And when possible, don't ask questions. Just figure out logically by default what best will help the customer at that point. Example is that statement thing. If I'm going and looking at the statements, probably most interested in the last 30 days. Why do you make me select it? Or again, you need to strike the balance. You might think, okay, for 90 days is the maximum limit, why not present the entire 90 days data? Okay, instead of the page loading in 30 seconds, it might take 50 seconds to load everything up, because every database call, depending on the heaviness of the data being returned, it can be expensive in terms of slowing down the page speed. So again, a month seems to be reasonable. So why don't we present the 1 month information? So when these discussions happen, when you're designing this statements page, these questions should occur to you. Okay, why can't I just make it simple? Why can't I make it easier for the user to drive this car? Why am I asking which month do you want and then adding a validation of you can maximum select 3 months? So again, figure out, okay, I want to present 30 days information at most, and then I'm not going to even allow you to select more than 30 days. The calendar grays out. That solves my problem. And for several years, this bank has not solved my problem. And every time I go into that page, it's like a pet peeve, right? So these are little things, but this day and age, saving a click, making one navigation simpler, that can make a lot of difference to the user, because our expectations are much higher, right? Like we transact with so many different apps, so many different websites on a regular basis, and we spot the good ones. Now, as a BA, you should start looking that, start appreciating that, and come up with your own way of making your system slightly better. And this concept is very inherent to making that happen. The lesser information you expose, the easier it is for the end user. Any questions?
No.
Yeah, no, it's making a lot of sense now.
All right, fabulous. And that's why you can see me driving the point of how as a BA you can learn from these concepts, and not really from, okay, what information does the payment object have to do with the loan object. It's less towards the technicality of how objects interact with each other and more towards how it applies to our job. So it kind of kills two birds in one stone, because you can kind of see how the developers think and how it is useful to us. Okay. The next concept is inheritance. So this is one line that I added for you to kind of quickly remember this. Birds of the same feather flock together. So as in, let me take a step back and go back to the car example for a minute. So we appreciated that for a class, you could have different levels. One of you even pointed that, right? You could have automobiles at a certain level, Toyota Camry cars at a certain level. In other words, I could explode this diagram, this automobile diagram, and I can keep going several layers, correct? Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Each of those layers is a specific kind of a previous layer. So let's go. Automobile, car, SUV, Toyota Camry car, right? So every Toyota Camry car is well, these are different examples. It's not the same hierarchy, but let's come up with the same hierarchy. So automobile, car, four-door car, and then Toyota Camry car, okay? So every Toyota Camry car is a four-door car. Every four-door car is a car. Every car is an automobile. Make sense?
Yeah.
So when you go up the chart, when you go up the hierarchy, you're generalizing things, aren't you?
Yes.
Yes.
And when you go down, you're getting more specific, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? And there's another interesting concept. So since every Toyota Camry car, well, I'm assuming there are no two-door cars for now, okay? So for every four-door Toyota Camry car, to be specific, I'll have to say Toyota Camry four-door car, obviously, based on how I laid it out. So if every Toyota Camry four-door car is a four-door car, every four-door car is a car. So let's stop right there. Every four-door car is a car. So which means a four-door car has to have a quality of a car, correct? correct?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
we are already calling it a car, right?
exactly,
When we say
exactly.
four-door car, we are already calling it a car.
Exactly, exactly. So a four-door car must meet the requirements of a car. It cannot meet the requirements of a SUV, right?
Right.
So here, for example, let's take another example. A pen is a generic one, right? A fountain pen is a specific one.
Mhm.
Is a fountain pen always fitting with the definition of a pen? Absolutely, right?
Yes.
Which means it has the same data and functions of a pen. Yes?
Right.
And here's the interesting part, and it has more. And it has more, right? Because if it's a fountain pen, then you have more specific nature, and hence it'll have more data and more functions tied to it. Make sense? Same
Right.
thing. Account, you can say in a generic term account, and then when you get specific, it's checking account, savings account, and so on. Make sense? And now we'll introduce this new concept called parent. So account is a parent, and then checking account, savings account are children,
Children.
child classes or subclasses. So account is a parent or a superclass or a class. The checking account, savings account are either subclass or a child class.
Mhm.
Make sense?
Right.
And the child class has always more data and functions or less data and functions compared to the parent class. The child class has less data and functions or more data and functions compared to the parent class.
Yes, because it depends on the type of the child.
But what is the answer to my question? What is
Oh, less. I would say less because
the child has less?
the account in general would
Don't
probably.
talk about why yet. Okay,
Oh,
what do others think? Less or more? Child has less or child has more?
Less.
Less?
I think child has more.
Precisely. Explain why.
I'm thinking of hierarchies
Yep,
in
perfect.
IT. I'm
You're on
thinking
the
of
right track.
right. I'm thinking of hierarchies in IT. When you have the parent, it's like general, and then as you go down to the lower, the second level, it has more. Something like that.
Exactly. Let's take it very, very simply. Would it take a lot more data to explain a fountain pen than a pen? Right? Because a fountain pen, you have to explain the generic qualities of pen because they are common, right?
Yes.
Plus what makes a fountain pen distinctively different. You have to explain both from a data and functions perspective, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So for that reason, the child always has more. It has the qualities of the parents plus more of its own
Mm.
distinguishing behavior, right? For example, account number, account open date, and whatnot is common between all these three things: account, checking account, and savings account, correct? However, the checking account has additional information. Okay, what is the maximum amount of checks that you can write in a month? Like what does that account allow? Maybe a bad example there. Uh, do you have a checkbook ordered or not, for example, is another possible attribute for the checking account. And for the savings account, you have additional information about interest rate. If you have a withdrawal limit, the checking account might have like a fund transfer daily limit, for instance. So those are additional information that specifically talks about the checking account and the savings account, which is not part of the account class, right? Make sense?
Makes sense.
All right. So to summarize, the child classes have everything that the parent class has, plus more. True or false?
True.
There are some data and functions that are common to the child class and the parent class. True or false?
True.
Which means the child class has inherited a lot of data and functions from the parent class.
True.
That
True.
is why this is also called inheritance as a concept. So when you're coming up the hierarchy, it's called generalizations, right? If you're going down the hierarchy, it's called, okay, you're inheriting more and more as you go. And hence it's also called inheritance.
Right. Makes sense.
It's a very interesting concept, isn't it?
Yep.
I don't hear interest in that. Like, yeah, whatever.
Because you know, it's sometimes it's like you could think either way. So it's I think it's helping to understand what track should be opted for the thought process.
Sure. Again, this is all about getting you strong on the terminology. That's why I'm spending a little bit more time here, is to make sure that you embrace that concept by itself, and it would occur where it needs to occur. All right. So for example, here on the right, we have this chart, right? Employee is on the top. You have a manager and a programmer, two types of employees, right? And then within the manager, you have three types of employees. Now, you might have, for all the employees, we have certain things, like these are the general holidays of the year. Every employee has that, right? And at the next level, there are certain things available for the manager that is not available for the programmer, and vice versa, possibly, right? They have their distinctive ways of looking at this, right? And more so within the further specification of whether you're a project manager or a department manager or a strategic manager, it varies, right? So from a BA angle, what can we learn from this? What can we appreciate from this concept? So one thing is you have to document things at the right level so that you don't avoid, so that you avoid redundancy. So for example, if a new policy allows all managers to get some additional perks, right? Where does it belong? At the manager box, right? Not a project manager, department manager, strategic manager level, correct?
Right.
So that is where you have to fit in. Same thing, if you're talking about accounts and you're talking about checking accounts and savings accounts, you have to identify which objects or which space gets affected. Because if you do it, something that belongs to the account, let's say they want to persist this information, account start date, so that they want to pass on some benefits for people that have held their account for like 5 years and 10 years and whatever milestones, right? They want to give some perks or they want to give some points or whatever. I'm just making up stuff. So our interest is to create an account open date. Where should you open it? Checking account, savings account level, or the account level?
Could you please repeat the question?
I want to, so I'm working for a bank and I have the general account object and I have the specific checking account and savings account object, right? And I want to start maintaining this new data field, account open date. Okay. And the purpose is every time they hit an anniversary, like 1 year or 5 year or whatever, I'm going to give them some bonus points or rewards or at least send a thank you email, something of that sort. So for whatever reason, the business wants account open date. Okay. Should I place that at the account level or the checking account, saving account level? Which class am I targeting?
Account.
Any other thoughts?
I would say account too.
All right.
need to filter to the whatever the next level.
So in short, are you also saying accounts? Or are you saying checking saving account?
I'm thinking like more like checking savings account because it depends on what kind of reward is there for each specific account.
Okay. And both the answers are correct. And this is a good question to ask your business users, because if you're going with the account object, then you can go with the earliest date, right?
Right.
You can track the anniversary based on when their first account was open, and you can send a thank you note and whatnot from that angle. That could be the use case that the business wants to do. It is also possible that you might have to track it at the savings account, checking account level, because as you mentioned, the perks can be different. And also just because the dates could be different, correct? Just because it was opened it could be opened 2 different times, it's better to maintain at the child level, one could argue. And even if you want to congratulate them based on the earlier account, it still makes sense to maintain at the child level, correct? And you still have that information. So in other words, if you maintain it at the parent level, you actually have less information. Tomorrow, if they want the independent dates, you don't have a way because you only track the earliest date, correct?
Right.
So personally, if it were me, I would ask them what the use case is. Like, do you want to do it at the account level or the sub account level? But when I talk to the developers, I would say, let's maintain it at the sub account level so that we are future proofing ourselves a little bit better, right? So even if they need something else, we have that information. This is more valuable. I might make that call as a BA, right?
Right.
Another one might say, okay, let's just keep it simple. If this is what they want based on the account, let's just put it on the account level. Why expend more for what we may never do? That might be another approach, right? So again, at least it gives us thinking. It starts us thinking about when you introduce new requirements, where do you introduce those requirements? Make sense?
Yes.
All right, that's about generalization and inheritance. Now the next couple of concepts, we won't get too technical into like how it is implemented in IT itself, but we'll just learn about the BA takeaway, because those are not, we don't have to work through them in that level. So we'll just have a high level conceptual overview of abstraction and polymorphism. Okay. Abstraction is knowing the level of detail based on who your audience is. So for example, if you're talking to the VP, right, and they ask you, okay, how's your project going? They don't mean for you to give them a lecture about all the problems you face and how you solved it and whatnot. Like they just want a one-liner project health, let's say. Everything's going great, except we had a small wrinkle, but that's resolved. Now we're back on track. We should be able to deliver on time. Simple, right? Compare it to your project manager one status. How's the project going? Same question, right? But they are expecting a lot more detailed answer. So based on who wants some information, you're presenting them at a different level. So this can be attributed as, if you have different levels of users within your software, right? Or you have an admin access to someone, and then you have manager access to someone, and you have employee access to other people. Let's say you have 3 different roles for the same screen. Then you have to ask yourself, okay, what information is relevant to the manager? Maybe they want a dashboard that looks through their employees. Employees look at their own information. Managers look at a dashboard of information. And if it's like the admin, they might want more statistical data. Make sense? So the same information has to be passed different ways for different types of people. You can't say, okay, you're a manager, you manage 10 people. I'll just repeat the employee screen 10 times for you. You just scroll through one screen at a time. That is probably not a good use case, right? So you as a user have to think through what makes sense for who, right? Otherwise, you'd be repeating the same screen for another level of user, and that is not useful for them. So you have to ask, okay, as a manager, what do you want to track? Like, what do you want to see in the dashboard? And then if you want to get into the detail, you can always go into an employee and look at that. But what is that you need at the first level before even you delve into the details? What is that you look for? Those are the questions you ask them at the interviewing sessions where you're trying to elicit requirements, right? Presenting at the right level of detail, knowing your audience. Make sense?
Yes.
So if you ask someone how to use a coffee machine, they might simply give you like a 3-step instruction. Maybe the coffee machine changed in your office. You are used to the old machine and now it's a new one. They'll tell you, oh, instead of this, do this. But otherwise, it's all good. Simple instructions. But if I have a new employee and they've not seen this kind of a coffee machine, you might have to give them like a 20-step explanation of, okay, this is where you find the cups, to that level of detail, right? So again, when you're developing IT systems, think about the context of the user and question yourself, what do they have to see? That is one angle to it. So far, so good?
Yes.
All right. The next angle to it is when you're starting out with the requirements, how do I put this? Let's say we are playing a game. I present you with a picture which is pixelated, like blurry picture, okay? And I gradually make it clearer and clearer and clearer, and you're supposed to guess what is in the picture, okay? So you start off with a very blurry image, and then as you go, I keep switching my slides, and you keep seeing it better and better and better, okay? Now, that's how requirements are also framed. Initially, it'll be like a hazy picture. You won't know too much of details. You'll have very less details. The more you delve into it, the more you have customer interviews and user interviews and surveys and whatnot, the requirements become clearer. That's obvious, right? So if you're starting out on a project, day one, you'll have very less idea about a particular product backlog item, but day 10, you probably would have much more detail into it, right? It's also important to capture the requirements at every level. For example, you would have high-level requirements which talk about high level, what do you want to do? Gradually delving into the detail level. So for a high-level requirement, before even you get into a high-level requirement, there are different documents that we produce. So once you know about a feature, you write a vision document or a feature document or a proposal, whatever, different companies call it differently. But to me, I think about that as a 2-pager. Okay, any project, no matter how complex it is, you could potentially write up a 2-page overview about it for the VP. Maybe some projects are a little bit more complex that you can't afford a double line space and you go 1.5 or even 1-line spacing between them. And maybe you'll have to cut down a couple of font sizes, but regardless, you get my point, right? About 2 pages, 3 pages, you should be able to have a high-level descriptive about any project, no matter how complex. An executive summary, if you will. So that is one document that we produce when the project is getting started. Like, this is essentially the pitch. You're getting your business sponsor to approve it. That's one level, potentially, right? And then once you get more understanding, once you break it down into smaller pieces, that 2-pager can explode into probably a 50-pager because you have more context into it. Maybe you had like 10 ideas there at a high level. Well, I mean, whatever the project states, right? Maybe it has to be, to keep it simple, 50 pages worth of documentation to cover that entire breadth of that project, and it goes to the next level of details. That's called it high-level requirements. So you have the vision document. Now you have the high-level requirements. So the high-level requirements talk about all the product backlog items, all the features that are desired. And then you pick each product backlog item and it gets into acceptance criteria or detailed requirements. So in this example, I illustrated, okay, you have a very high level, 50,000 foot bird's eye view documentation called the vision document or a feature document or a bird's eye document, whatever you want to call it. I want to use three simple terms: vision documents, high level documents, detailed requirements. And as you go deeper into the course, you'll, or even a lot of BA requirements, job descriptions, you'll see a lot of talk about, oh, you should create BRD, FRD, SRS, user stories, use cases. No matter what kind of document it is, it falls within these three categories: vision, high level, detailed. That's it. Don't let the acronyms fool you or scare you. Whatever they call it, whatever template that they put it in, it does not matter. Is it very high level, or detailed? That's the question you want to ask. If it's very high level, it's executive summary. It's high level, then it's good amount of detail so that you can start picking up those items or at least understand what each line item is. Or then you can get into the very little nitty-gritty detail. Now put it in context. Let's say you have, let me think about it. You have a budget, okay? You have a budget for your department and the budget is $100,000 every month, okay? That is the highest level. Okay, within $100,000 per month, this is what I'm going to do. That is your plan, right? My $100,000 will get spent in this manner, and it's probably like a couple of pages. You'll have a graph to show how much money goes towards what, and you might have a trend diagram from, you know, how much that actual spending was in the last several months, and then you might have another bar graph that shows like year to year how much this 100,000 has been actually spent, and are there any instances where it was overspent. Again, executive summary, right? High level of how that 100,000 will get used and how that trend has been in the last few months and from last 2 years, and anything that is strikingly different for this time around. Okay, that's the high level summary. Next, you get into the specifics, the more detailed specifics, right? We spoke about how much gets spent into each department. Now you start analyzing department wise. Okay, within this department, these are the different spendings, major categories. Okay, this department spent this much amount or will spend this much amount, and these are the different line items. Okay, so let's call it line items. Department 1, line items, department 2, line items, and so on. So it gives you a little bit more of a breakdown than the high level summary. Now, further break it down into, okay, for each line item, how many invoices would you expect? As in, which vendors are you contracting? What is their responsibility? How much will they charge? All those nitty-gritty will go in the details. So just like that, any requirement, you're going to have a very high level, detailed. Make sense? So for us to understand our deliverables, you need to keep an eye on the abstraction. Is this too much detail for this documentation? And no matter what they call a specific requirement document, ask for a template, look at a template that is filled in. That's the easy part. Knowing how to fit into that template is the easy part. But this level of abstraction, it's more of an art than a specific method. It's more of having that understanding is key, right? Otherwise, you're going to either give too much information for someone up top or miss details for someone who needs the details, like the developers. So you need to know who your audience is and what you're presenting so that you're not copy pasting the same information everywhere. So you need to know how you engage with the different templates that are available to you. Make sense? Any questions at this point?
No.
No, not for me.
All
No.
right, excellent. Okay, so then this part was good silence. Good. All right. Next, let's get into association. So objects are meaningful, useful only based on the relationship with other objects. We already saw how they communicate with each other with messages, right? So for example, when we talk about invoice, just to generate the invoice, you need who the payer is, who payee is, who's the bank that processes the payment. All these come together when you're talking about invoices. So you're always going to have associated objects. Okay. Statement object is associated to customer and accounts and transactions. So if you're generating a monthly statement, where does the information have to come from? It has to come from the customer because you need the name, address, and whatnot to put on the top of the statement. You need to know the account information and you need to know what transactions were done in that calendar month, assuming this is a monthly statement. So these three statements feed in information to the statement object, right? This is an example. So when we talk about association, you think about objects in relation to each other. So now even going back to our Joe example, right? By inspecting these objects, you can kind of see how they relate to each other, right? A borrower is related to loan. A borrower is related to payment. Makes sense? Yes. A payment is related to the borrower. Payment is related to loan. Payment is related to nothing else I can see from your, oh, maybe the interest calculation. No, that's more on the loan. So you can kind of see how they are related to each other, how they talk to each other, how and when they interact with each other. For example, the customer service object agent, customer service agent interacts with loan, interacts with borrowers. They may never have to interact with the document custodian. Document custodian interacts with loan, interacts with borrower, maybe interacts with the bank, right? So there is always a relationship among objects that you'll need to watch out for. Okay. So how are they related to each other? Which object needs the assistance of which other object? That sort of a thing. The next one is aggregation relationship. What do we mean by aggregation? Some objects together make up another object. That sounds a bit confusing. A group of objects make up a larger object. That might be a little bit more manageable. Let's say there are multiple departments that make up a company. Okay, multiple departments make up a company. Now, in this case, if you remove one of the departments, the company still exists, correct? A small company only has a few limited departments, right? You take away a department and still the company is a company. Nothing different about it, correct?
Right.
So in this aggregation relationship, many parts make a whole, and take away a part, the whole still remains undisturbed. You have a school of fish. Remove some fish, it's still a school of fish, correct? Unless like most fish is gone and then you only have like one fish, still like you have a larger picture and the parts contribute to the whole but don't make up the whole. You take away one department or two departments, still company is a company. In fact, take away all departments, a company is still a company, right? So aggregation is a relationship by which several parts make up a whole, but the whole is not dependent on the parts. Okay. So it helps us understand the structure of different objects. Unlike composite relationship. In a composite relationship, it's like the printer. The printer is made up of toner, the paper tray, the internal drums and rollers and whatnot. If you take away something, it's not a working printer anymore, right? Because the parts make the whole, and the whole doesn't exist without each of the parts. You will need all the part objects to make the whole object. Otherwise, it's not really a whole. So here you have several cubes that make up one large cube. Just take away one cube and the large piece is not a cube anymore, right? It loses its integrity. So it's very similar to aggregation. However, remove a smaller object and the larger object is no longer what it used to be. Okay. So for example, an order has customer information, billing information, shipping information, product, quantity, and all that. Unless you have all of this, an order isn't an order. So it helps us kind of identify any missing pieces or things that you might be forgetting to make sure that it's always addressed. So that is where the composition relationship or composite relationship is useful to know about. Is that clear?
Yes.
All right, any questions until this point on aggregation or composition?
So composition doesn't have to be like a complete failure, right?
What do you mean complete failure?
Like you remove one piece and the thing, like give an example of a printer, right? That you say like you remove one thing, and I'm guessing that it's just an example, I understand, but in example of a printer, it would be a complete breakdown. Like you won't be able to use it. Like you take away the cartridge, right?
Right.
It's a complete failure kind of a situation that it's
Correct.
no longer of use, right?
Correct. So even in IT, the same thing holds good. In other words, unless you complete the object, the order object, it's not useful. So this is helping us consciously remembering everything that needs to be for that object to be successful. So in this order example, you need everything. So what this concept teaches us is to not forget something that is critical, central piece to it.
I see. Okay.
Okay. Next, we get into multiplicity. So these are rules that you can put in place to ensure completeness in requirements or ensure that you're not missing requirements. How exactly do we do that? Okay. So there are some rules that you can put in place. For example, one rebate per household. That is your business policy, right? So by structuring the database itself to enforce these rules, by having these rules in your business layer, you can ensure that the rule is met. So for example, no more than one rebate per household. So as soon as you see a second rebate requested from the same address, then it gets flagged as not valid, right? So that is a rule that you can enforce within your system. And then you can't have this promotion unless you purchase 3 items or, unless you purchase this dollar amount. In that case, again, if you build in a rule based on multiplicity, right, based on the quantity, then you can enforce that rule. Okay? And maybe in a school, you will have a rule that each subject that you advertise must be handled by at least one teacher. Of course, right? So that way, if you're missing something, the system will prompt you, okay, you don't have a teacher assigned to this subject. You need at least one. So it talks about minimum requirements. For example, unless you order 3 items, you're not going to get this coupon code to work. Or you have this subject which does not have a teacher assigned. Both those instances, you are ensuring minimum requirement. And in the other example, one rebate per household, you're ensuring that the business policy is adopted. There's some background noise. If you can mute yourself, that'll be very useful. Okay. So multiplicity relationship allows us to handle instances where you need to enforce a rule or enforce a minimum requirement. And in this case, it's important from a BA's perspective because you have to watch for these things. Oh, there is this condition here. I shouldn't forget about this. We should implement a rule. So it helps you figure out the rules as you're participating in conversations and discussions. Okay. Now we'll get into UML. In the next chapter, we'll get into a lot more details on use case diagrams and different UML diagrams and whatnot. But at this point, just wanted to quickly give you a quick flash introduction on UML as a precursor to what is next to come in the forthcoming chapters. So UML is a unified modeling language. It's kind of been there for a while, and the reason we want to make sure you understand the concepts in UML is regardless of how you document these requirements. Like I mentioned, as long as the requirements, you see them as very high level and detailed. Similarly, you can have diagrams that depict the business process or the state of something. There are a lot of diagrams, different set of diagrams that you learn under UML. Regardless of how you practice those or put them into effect, whether you draw them up as flowcharts, whether it's UML or not even UML, something generic, the concepts behind UML are still very strong and gives you that structured thought process for yourself as a BA so that you can explain things well. So knowing that theory is very helpful regardless of which format you use. So in other words, I'm a firm believer that anyone can look at a template and complete a document and furnish a similar document. That is not difficult at all. But when you're doing so, how do you not miss a certain concept? How do you identify areas that can be efficiently handled? How do you avoid redundancy? How do you structure it so that it's easy to follow? All these things are very tactical and you get better with practice, but having that theory behind in your mind really helps you deliver that succinctly every single time. So just like we looked at all these different object-oriented concepts, no one's going to ask you questions about object orientation at the interviews. I don't think so. No one's going to ask you what is the difference between aggregate and composite. But when such a concept comes through, this will definitely strike your mind and be like, oh, okay, this is what this is. Now, as soon as I look at such an example, okay, these are the minimum requirements here. Oh, this is a multiplicity, which means, okay, I need to document a rule. So you'll see that connection the more you go into it. You'll see this background information helpful in your analysis. And that's why we cover this chapter in our program. Although you might not find this in most of the program descriptions, we make it a point to cover it because it's good background information to have in it, and it can relate to you. And similarly, a lot of people talk about flowcharts and this diagram and that diagram. We simply use unified modeling language as a base because it has a set of rules of engagement, sort of, so to speak. Every diagram has its own input and output and structure to it. So that if you learn that in UML, you can adopt it in any other context, sorry, right? So
So
UML is
is Visio one kind of UML?
correct.
Okay.
I want to say Visio is one kind of modeling that you can do, one modeling tool. Okay. So when I say UML, it's not a language, so to speak. It's not like SQL or Java or .NET. UML is just a structure. It's a template for different types of diagrams. Just like when you're constructing a home, you'll have different diagrams of your home, right? You'll have the plumbing diagram, you'll have the electric diagram, you'll have the top view, you'll have the front elevation. Each of these diagrams is important in its own context, correct? It gives you a different angle of what your home looks like. And it helps you identify problems before you bump into it. You can say, oh, this bedroom is too small. How can I even fit in a queen bedroom here? So can we make this room bigger, right? The whole purpose is for you to foresee what you will see in reality, what you will see once this is done. Make sense?
Yes.
So essentially, These are a set of diagrams that you will learn. UML is nothing but a set of diagrams that you learn to depict the objects and classes and relationships and flows and whatnot that we learned so far. So as an example, you might have a flow chart which says, okay, you know what, a customer is going to transfer funds. Okay, this is your sample scenario. When you're transferring funds, what are the different things can happen? The most straightforward thing is you have enough money, you already set up this person that you need to transfer to. Boom, 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 done. That's the simplest, or what I call happy flow scenario, or the main flow. Now, not everything in life goes that smooth, right? You almost always have some exception to this so-called simple rule. You might not have enough funds. Then comes the question, okay, do you want to transfer from savings? Then comes the question, do you have enough in savings or not? That's one problem you could encounter on the way. Another thing could be your account, the transferee, whoever you want to transfer to, is not set up. Okay, do you want to set up that person right now? And do you have all their information? And is the information passing all the validations? That's another bump you could navigate on the way, and then you kind of have the solution to it as well. Now, okay, you have the account information, you've somehow made the minimum, the amount necessary available in your account, maybe you transfer from savings, now it's all good. Now, can you imagine any other things that can possibly go wrong? Oh, you're transferring more than what your daily limit is, so you can't transfer today, right? Or your transferee bank information, so they need additional information or something like that. I'm just making up scenarios now. So for a simple transfer funds use case, and I'm introducing the word use case here, transfer funds is a use case. And the description that I gave you, the different scenarios, those are covered in an activity diagram. What activity transpires between you and the bank, or rather the system, when you're attempting to transfer, the flow, the process, that's called activity diagram in UML. Regular English speak, it's called a flow chart, the flow from one to another, right? You have a start, you have an end, and then things go through, funnel through the start to end. Make sense? So there are different diagrams that depict. So we covered two right now. One is a use case diagram, which talks about the different use cases that a user can do potentially. Could be transfer funds, withdraw money, all view statements, download transactions, all the different things that the user has the capability to do. That would be in a UML use case diagram. Go into a specific use case, and you can delve into, okay, what are the flows, what are the scenarios possible within that use case before it's, once it starts getting executed and before the execution is done and complete. Okay, so start of the use case. What is the main flow? What is the most straightforward scenario? What are the different alternate flows, which means might be a roundabout path, but you can still achieve success for that use case. Now, are there any scenarios where you have to just halt? You can't do much about it. You don't have enough funds that you want to transfer, right? You can have an alternate flow wherein they can reduce the amount to transfer and still go successful. But what if that doesn't match the need of the user? They have to abandon, right? So that is another exception flow. So main flow is the most straightforward, happy scenario. You can have n number of alternate flows, meaning it's not as straightforward, but you can still make it happen. Or you might have exception, and not to be confused with the word exceptional, totally different things. Exception, meaning rarity, happens very rarely. Exception, not exceptional, which is extraordinary, right? So exception scenario, which could be that, okay, for whatever reason, you couldn't do it. Maybe you exceeded the limit of daily transfer that your bank allows, you didn't have the money, or you don't have the transferee information with you at this time. Either way, you have to abandon the use case because you're not completing it. So again, these are scenarios that we thought about, right? So for each of these scenarios, you can draw it up as a diagram. In fact, you can draw the entire thing in a single diagram. You might have all these branches and, coming back to the another point and whatnot, but you could possibly think about an elaborate diagram which you can draw right now, because all of us know what transfer funds looks like. We've done it, we know what the scenarios are, and we can chalk out a very good diagram pretty quickly. Doing the same thing for a scenario that you don't know well enough, that takes a lot of consultation with the business users, consultation with the stakeholders, knowing the internal workings. And now think about abstraction as a concept, right? You start out with a high level diagram because you only know limited information. You only have like 5 steps. Does this sound good? You present it to the users and they'll be like, oh, what about this? What about that? You haven't documented this. Okay, now your 5 steps becomes 10 steps, and then you have like 2 alternate scenarios built as well. So the more detailed discussions you get into, the more detailed your diagram becomes, which means your abstraction level, right? It becomes deeper and deeper. You're very abstract in the beginning, and then you're less and less abstract. Your dull pixelated image becomes clearer and clearer every version of this diagram, and you go into the details of these diagrams. So essentially with UML, you will learn how to draw out the notations and what each diagram is intended to be and how you construct these diagrams. And that will give you an idea about how to develop these diagrams to use in conjunction with your business users to validate your understanding, to give it to your developers so that they have a high level view. I mean, no matter how many pages of documentation you write, it's easier to depict some certain things in diagrams, but they're not all encompassing. So you will need to have some sort of a documentation so that the testing team has clear instructions, development team has clear instructions, but no substitute for diagramming something, right? You always start with the diagram and then supplement it with text. Then it's more useful, it's more palatable, right? So that is why we will learn UML and different types of UML diagrams, and it gives you a very clear point of view, very clear ammunition to get into the next steps. So the next chapters will be on UML, and this is just a quick, what is UML, why do you need it, sort of precursor before you address that in the next class. Any questions on UML or any other object orientation concepts?
No, not right now.
All right, excellent. So we are drawing close to our planned time here, but I'm happy to take any other generic questions like from the entire session today or any other generic BA questions. But before that, if someone has to drop off, I would like to get some feedback on today's class and get a high level what went well, any suggestions you have. So I'll open up the floor for feedback from each of you.
My first question is, when is the homework due?
Okay, I would give it until like middle of next week. Let's say Wednesday, end of the day.
Okay.
Oh yeah, sounds good. I thought it was tomorrow before.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. That's gonna be a bit tight.
No. I wouldn't stress you over the weekend. Don't worry about it.
Wednesday works.
Yeah, Wednesday. Okay, good.
Okay,
All right,
thank
jump
you
in
very
on the
much.
feedback about today's class, please.
I think it was very informative, and every concept has been explained with clarity, so I'm really happy about it. I'm really happy about everything so far. So thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And I'm sorry I have to drop off now. I'll see everyone next weekend. Oh, tomorrow. Sorry, tomorrow.
And,
okay.
And the timings, Shilata will confirm with you. So look for a message from her. She asked me to pass that on. She will later on confirm the exact timings for tomorrow's class, and if any adjustments need to be made, she'll consult with you. But look forward to the timings from Shilata.
I think this time works very well if we can keep this.
Yeah. I mean, she's trying to do that. Generally, that is what is going to be the case. Tomorrow, we might start a little bit earlier or a little bit late, and that's what she'll come back to you with. But generally, we try to stick to this similar timing.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, this is Tejal. I'm learning a lot of new terminology because I'm not from IT background, and it's really helping me. What I think is very important that I learned today is, the thought process is very important in this whole, process, because I think, um, somewhere around the slides, you were saying that getting into too much detail could easily get very cumbersome and could easily become like a very stressful part of the whole process, and how not to get into that without missing out on the details. I think that balance is very important.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that was something very important to kind of be aware of. Overall, I think it was really nice, and the way you explain and the way you give examples wherever necessary is helping out a lot in getting certain ideas clear. And I think I would agree that so far it's been really good.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been really very good for me in the sense that I had gone through a lot of videos on Udemy on business analysis, but the way you were breaking down the concepts made it very simple to understand. Like when you were breaking down some other things, I'll think, oh, that's what that video was trying to say when I was watching it. And also my takeaway today when I began to see where I get in as the BA is when you say minimalistic, as simple as possible, and better customer experience. Those three concepts, that's when I began to really see that as a BA, sometimes you get stuck with a lot of details without really thinking, what does the user want? So that really helped me a lot because I was getting overwhelmed with Udemy. And I would say, oh my God, so if I have to go for an interview, what am I going to say with all this information overload? So it went pretty well. And I like the way you break down the concepts. And this reinforces the idea that I really, really wanted to take a class with someone so that I could get the concepts very well. So thank you.
Fabulous, fabulous. That is great to hear. And one thing about Udemy and these other resources, a lot of times people come in either with the purest concept, like textbooks, right? This is what this shall be done. There's no other leeway. They very clearly and precisely lay out, okay, this is the way to do it. It's not. It's very, very fluid in the real world. That's one thing that we try to drive. And the second thing is, most of these, a lot of trainers and providers, they are very, very strong academically, right? They are coming from like great background that is academic, and they work in the industry as well, but they continue to drive the academic front because they have these masters and PhDs in computer science. But what we try to do is we come from more of a practical, okay, someone who has no IT experience, how do we drive the story for them? Because this is definitely a profession where you can get into without any IT experience, without much IT experience or any IT experience at all. And the barriers of entry are so low. But when you talk to these computer science, I want to say geeks, you can be very easily led to a path where you think this is probably hard. I'm not sure. You can begin
Right.
to question yourself, and you should not. It's my humble opinion. So we want to make this accessible to as many people as possible. And for us, the lowest common denominator, as you can see, is pretty much someone with zero IT experience. We start at the level of what is a project and who is involved, and that's why our examples are pretty much trying to be very down to earth and very, very simple to understand, because it's hard to follow the big stuff if you don't have a very strong fundamental. So if you have this fundamental clear, no matter what discussion you're thrown into, you somehow have all this ammunition, all this understanding behind your minds. To be honest with you, these first two things, a lot of training providers may not even address because it's assumed to be known. And the concepts that we studied were not too hard to understand, but you need to develop that mindset to look for patterns. That's how you learn, right? So
Right.
at a new job, unless you understand these patterns and know where it belongs in your theory, your own conceptual understanding, your own black box, it's very hard to make a connection and relate to it. And one of the biggest challenges that people that approach us say is, oh, I tried to learn so much online, I'm still not confident, how can you help me? My first cut would be, okay, you know what, just stop learning, start appreciating how much you know, because there's always a certain unknown. Like I've been we created this course back in 2005. I've been training for a very long time, but there is still so much I don't know. Absolutely, right? We learn a lot. There's no dearth of learning new things and new things that come up, but the foundations have to be strong, and that's where you should focus on. So stick to the basics, stick to the fundamentals, and then embrace them really well, and study as many concepts at this basic, this foundation level. That will help you a lot, because let's say you need to learn a new thing, a new concept, or a new technology, or something for interview, right? Specifically,
Mhm.
it's BA, but you need to learn something. One of our consultants, she has an interview with the mobile application related area for Monday. So we don't cover mobile application development as part of the course, of course, because you never know what you're getting into. But we cover aspects of any development, right? So
Right.
now, if you need to know specifically for mobile application development, what are the SDKs that are used to develop? What are the UI challenges specifically for mobile? For example, you don't have a right click on the mobile, right? So you need to have certain context specific for mobile development, but that is easy to do within 24 hours. But
Right.
if you don't have the generic concept really imbibed and embraced into yourself, anything will seem hard. So I would say the course pretty much focuses on most areas that you need to know. And I'm using the word most instead of saying all, because I don't think any course, any timeline can give you all. So, ours is a prescription for your success for the most part. Probably, gives you a good amount of holding on good amount of topics. So we cover broad and we drive the foundational knowledge strong. However, you should even reach out outside of the course. And then the reason I gave you homework on doing more research and getting into the details and whatnot, that will teach you a few more things. Again, stick to the basics, stick to the foundation, and then have it strongly retained for yourself. And move on to the next one. That is what I want to advocate very, very strongly. Move on to the next one. Don't go too deep that you can't, you feel lost, and you can't move to the next topic. So there's so much to learn. Keep learning, but focus on the breadth, not the depth, right? The
Right.
more concepts you know, the better. So go through the course in its own pace, and then learn about each topic. Before you come to the class, try to gain some understanding beforehand, do your research, and then between classes you have a week. So use that wisely, delve deeper, study something new, and then after the course you will feel quite confident about most BA job descriptions. And one thing to keep in mind is, as you look through the job descriptions, don't freak out if you see an acronym that we didn't specifically cover in the course. It's probably something related to what we've done. So, find your ground, find what, okay, Google it, then you'll know where exactly it fits in. Oh, it's talk. This is how we refer it in our thing. You might say, okay, for FRD. We don't specifically spend an entire chapter on what an FRD is and how to do an FRD. We talk in depth about how to write use cases, and that's your holding ground. Okay, FRD is another way of writing functional requirement document, because a lot of beginners, they get stuck up on, oh, how do I do this template, how do I do that template, how do I we didn't cover this specifically. We covered it in some other format
Mm-hmm.
deeply enough Now, adapting to a different format, that should be easy enough once you understand the concepts and foundation strongly.
Right.
So I would like to ask you if you have any recommended Udemy videos or anything like that. I very briefly looked at a couple of them, but I haven't even really finished any single of the trainings on Udemy yet.
Okay.
But if you have, a certain, because as you know that there's like a lot on Udemy, it's very hard to pick and choose, and there's so much information out there that I really don't want to get tangled up into things that kind of would confuse me.
Exactly.
I'd
Exactly.
rather
So
go
I
with,
would say,
yeah.
don't attempt to complete entire Udemy course. Just follow the course, okay, and let your curiosity drive what you're learning and where you're learning from. So, for example, today we covered a whole lot, right? Do your research on each of these. Google these. Go to YouTube, right? Look
Right.
for, like, just get immersed in each of these topics. You have the PDF of the course book, right? So go immerse yourself in each of these topics and then learn it from a couple of different angles. That way you'll get the concepts more strongly inbuilt. Okay, get through the course, and while you're doing the course, get these ancillary materials and let your curiosity drive it. Don't worry about a specific Udemy course or a specific website or anything like that. Just Google it and learn more and more. And also remain in context while you're doing the course, after doing the course. What do I mean by remain in context? There are a couple of websites I can guide you to: batimes.com and then modernanalyst.com.
What's the second one?
modernanalyst.com.
And BA Times, right?
BA Times. Yeah, batimes.com. Both these websites are a very good source of amazing articles about a lot of things BA wise, right? So look at the blogs, look at the topics, and anything that interests you, right? Go to Quora and then search for business analysts and just look at the question and answers there. Go to glassdoor.com and then search for BA interview questions and answers there, right? So that's what I mean by being in the context, because again, it's kind of know-how. And then this is not a technical course, right? It's not like, okay, here are your commands, and once you master them, you're good. Not exactly, right? It takes a lot of street smartness and character to your BA profile. No two BAs are the same.
Right.
Unlike a math problem or a coding problem, right? This is how best you deliver customer experience can be entirely different based on how you do your BA work. It can be fundamentally different, right? So that is why knowing the subject matter, just stick to the basics and let the course guide you onto where those additional tentacles form. And then once you're done with the course, then reach out to other knowledge. Let's say you decide to do a course on Udemy. Certainly do that. And then as you do it, you'll be like, oh, okay, this is how it relates to my primary BA course. And you'll identify and appreciate the similarities, right? And maybe they are going into a little bit more depth. So if you want to, you can satiate your curiosity with that. But I would say, unless you have a specific interview or a job application that you're applying, don't even bother going too deep and too much into it, because then you'll never start applying for jobs. So my takeaway is, let the program give you a roadmap. And as you're curious about things, do some additional research so that you will retain those concepts as you learn. Use the time between classes wisely, and then stay in context. You can never stop doing that. So stay in context and then learn what's happening in the industry, and just be aware. Take a look at the IIBA IIBA website, International Institute of Business Analysts. So that business analysis, that is also a good one to keep an eye on, their articles and blogs and whatnot. So again, that I wouldn't spend too much time, but about half hour every day, just to wear your BA hat and know how things are done. So once you do that, I think, you'll be more than ready to start applying for jobs. And then once you have a specific job requirement where you need additional prep, then you can get into how best you can prepare yourself for that specific job opportunities. But until then, stick to the basics and you should be good.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, those were some great tips.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And I don't know if rest of the trainings are going to be with you, but I really hope it is with you.
I'm a filler today, unfortunately.
Oh yeah.
I don't do the regular training sessions anymore. I just can't afford the time. And I stepped in as a last minute emergency option. So
All
until
right.
you wish for other trainers to have emergencies all the time.
So tomorrow it's someone different?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. I stopped. I had to stop taking classes years ago. One reason I would point you to is for my recordings from Sri Lanka. Okay.
Okay.
Not that, you're not in good hands. All our trainers have, and they worked with us for, I think, minimum of 8-10 years. And one person has been with me for, I can't even remember how long. So you're in great hands in terms of trainers, but it helps to have two different contexts, even if the material is exactly the same or similar, right? And since I created the course, I have some specific thought process laid out into how I structured the course. So you might benefit from that. So my suggestion to you is take the recordings from Sri Lanka, and then you can even go ahead, like stay ahead of the regular classes, so that, like, let's say next week they're going to cover a certain topic. You know that, right? Based on where you stop. Start reviewing those recordings ahead of time so that you can use your in-class time more wisely to ask questions and get a little bit deeper and whatnot. So I think it'll give you enough context when you learn it from two different trainers, just two different perspectives on the same thing. So that is something I would recommend you take up in terms of a resource.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Absolutely, especially if you're a beginner, that can help you a lot.
Right. So I have one more question. So what has been the success ratio of people like me, especially, who has no IT background and they are, transitioning to this particular field? What has been the success ratio, and in your experience, how career-wise, how they have done? I'm sure you have been training for so many years. You may have seen some people's graph, like their career graph after, they entered this field. So just like a general, observation that you have in your experience.
Well, I wouldn't consider you a beginner. You call yourself a beginner in IT, but overall, from a career standpoint, you're not a beginner, right? You've done a lot of good work. So an average person that comes into us, they don't even have much of the job experience, and even they have been quite successful in finding a job. So when you say success ratio and things like that, it gets a little bit hairy, right? Because two different people are two different people. But generally speaking, when you have some business experience to back you up, the main advantage to you is you have the ability to put into context what you learn into your own business scenario. And the reason I give very simplistic examples like, cars and iPod and bank account and whatnot is because all of us know about it, right?
Right.
But always relate this to your own background, own experience, own knowledge. Now, the reason I asked you to go to Captera and then find a project of your choosing is I know that you'll choose a project that you have a strong subject matter expertise on, right?
Probably, yeah.
So when you do that, you have something where you have a strong subject matter. Let me take a step back. So within the course, I use very, very simple examples because we are learning a new concept. The examples and the domain needs to be something that we can all follow easily, right?
Right.
Now, if you want to strengthen that understanding, choose a domain that you're strong in and apply the PA skill set on it. That will give you more confidence of having delivered something relevant to what your background is, right? Which is what you're going to do in a job, in a new job. Hopefully you'll find something related to your background. And even if you don't, right,
Yeah.
the BA know-how is the same regardless of the industry. That's the beauty of this discipline, right? So I think that will help you a lot. For someone who has that business background, that becomes like really, really simple and easy, because someone who is new to IT and new to the business world, they struggle a little bit to put things in context. But to go back to your question, for someone who has business experience and they are new to IT, it's not at all difficult to get in and break through. You will now just need to focus how you can showcase BA skill set in your past experience. Now you can create a functional resume, as in, don't put your job description as accountant, right? Put
Right.
your what BA related activities have you done on that job, right? Because once you know the concepts, I mean, this is customer facing. One way or the other, every discipline, every job role out there, you're gathering requirements and you're implementing what they ask for, right? Which is the definition of a BA job, thankfully. So essentially, find out all these opportunities where you are, created a process or modified a process, as an example. All areas where you've, discussed with your business partners and arrived at a solution. Look at all those opportunities and then build that into your BA resume. And then that way, you're not applying as a beginner, you're applying as, okay, I've done business analysis related work in these jobs and this is how. And then you can talk to it very easily because you're going through a program which can give you the confidence in adopting that language, that way of convincing, that you can pick up a new project and then be successful at it. So if you can demonstrate what you've done in the context of what you're learning, then you can easily convince the interviewer that you're more than capable of building onto it and adding more, adding value to what they are doing. So in other words, don't say, oh, I maybe sort of want to do BA. Tell them that this is how I've done BA. Now, how can I help you? And if they ask a question, you're going to answer it in the context of your strong domain and the BA concepts, which will be you playing off your strengths.
Right.
Wow, that is very, very useful.
Yeah. Yeah, because, like knowingly, unknowingly, in our current jobs, we always participate in process improvements. It's kind of part of everyone's job these days to, improve efficiencies and, figure out, where we can save time and where we can save efforts and, things like that, which is like kind of on daily basis. Probably all of us are doing it anyways.
Exactly. And to be honest with you, anyone can do a BA job without even, like, once you're thrown into a job, you can be successful because most of it is common sense, right?
Exactly.
But
So it has to be logical. Yeah.
exactly. However, the job description is going to have a checkbox. Going through a program will help you fill those checkboxes, number one. And number two, even for your own sake, you will have the confidence that, okay, I have a structured learning backing me, that I'll be able to demonstrate while I do my job. So I'm not second guessing myself.
Right.
Those are the only reasons you have to, quote unquote, learn how to do BA job, because there's a structure and there's a certain method to it, which will help you not miss requirements and get to the shortest, least resistance path of getting something done.
And I guess, what other thing that makes a difference after training is, you get some level of confidence. You, especially when you learn from someone you think who knows, who knows and understands this particular, field very well. It gives you some kind of confidence in, whatever you have learned and whatever you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I guess, would help a little bit as well.
Exactly, more from a mentoring angle, yes.
Yeah, because like as I mentioned earlier, like my previous job, I had an opportunity to work with the IT team, And it was great. I mean, there was no training, there was no nothing, like, you know, just my manager told me that this is what we are doing. And it never even occurred to me that I have never done this. How am I going to do it? It was simply that we have different clients. We need to look at their needs, and we are designing these in-house softwares for them. So let us just sit down and discuss what they want and what we can offer.
Sure.
That's how it started. And then it became like, you know, when you were mentioning this Jira and Sprint and these, the concept that you mentioned about this, the series, I forgot the name, where this 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13 one.
Fibonacci.
I actually have done all that, you know. So as you were talking about it, like, it all came back to me in
I mean,
my
one way
head.
or the other, you will relate it to your job. Yes.
Yeah. So that particular, and as I said, you know, it was not like the whole profile of my job, but it was part of it. And as you said, I was never trained for it or anything, but we just jumped into it and we got it done. So, so yeah, it's very logical. It has
Absolutely.
its common
Absolutely.
sense, and as long as, you know, you deliver what the client wants and everyone is happy, then that's it. So
Exactly.
yeah, so yeah, I think this is good, and hopefully, you know, it would be very, very helpful along the way and in future also. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, guys. There was some of the discussions were really interesting while we were doing the class. So, you know, even I had an opportunity to learn a thing or two. So it was very insightful discussions and nice questions. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.